welcome everybody to the second episode of the Logical Shaman podcast. Today is different. I'm actually going to be doing an interview today. So I have my first interview guest. And my interviews are going to be called Intra-Views because I kind of want to come at it from the angle of trying to find out what's inside of another person. And that's what intra means, from within versus between two things. So today I'm welcoming Thomas on the podcast, who has been very generous to be my first guinea pig guest on the show. He actually volunteered for the pleasure. So Thomas, welcome. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, and I didn't know much about your podcast, but I know I wanted to help out. I've always wanted to be on some sort of show, at least for something, see how it is.
For
But
sure.
I definitely came on it because I wanted to hear your point of view and my point of view on different things. I just like talking about things outside of the common narrative, if that makes sense.
For sure. Is there someone else there with you too? Is that your wife or girlfriend?
My girlfriend. She's
Hey.
watching a video, has some headset on, so she doesn't want to be part of this.
Nice. Okay. Well, no worries. Yeah, she doesn't have to be. But
Cool.
so what made you? You said you've always kind of wanted to be on some kind of show or something like this.
Yeah.
Do you listen to like a lot of podcasts or shows or things of that nature?
Well, just normal podcasts like Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, I
And
listen to a lot of Tim Pool too.
conversations. Thought of making my own before, and it just seemed pretty cool that you're making one.
For
And I
sure.
also help you out, of course.
Well, you said you don't know much about it. There's not much yet. Like I said, there's only been one episode. I've also been, what kind of got me into gear on it, like I've wanted to do podcasting for a while. I make music, so I already kind of know how to record things. But a couple of my friends, Paul and Matt, started a podcast a couple months ago. I'm not sure exactly how long, but called Bridging the Gap. And they invited me on for a couple episodes, and I kind of got really excited about it and built this studio to kind of help them out and get my own, stuff out there too. So,
Of course.
but yeah, I appreciate it, man. It seems like you're definitely kind of an intellectual. I asked you some, topics, and you brought up some really interesting stuff to talk about. And we were talking before the show. You're into like science fiction and stuff like that too, which I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy and just interesting ideas. I like stories that do things outside the box that kind of make me think of people in reality in different ways. What got you into sci-fi?
Well, when I was a kid, my family treated me to Star Wars, and that was like one of my end-all be-all things is like Star Wars, everything Star Wars.
For sure,
Like
me
when I was
too.
growing up, I always enjoyed Legos that were like Star Wars and everything, and I just couldn't get enough of science itself in the first place. It seems I would always look up different scientific facts about different animals and whatnot. I guess I was just that type of person.
No, that's cool. That's my kind of people, man. I just love people that are interested about the world and want to explore it. That was my favorite thing about, I grew up with Star Wars, but also Star Trek was a huge thing because it was all about exploration, not just of the universe, but of like ideas and morality. And, they talked about things that they don't really talk about in other TV shows.
Yeah, I do remember the one, a couple different episodes, especially the one where like he was stuck in a cage, and he couldn't get out. Period. But it turns out that they actually tricked him into seeing something that wasn't there.
Hmm. I think there was a couple episodes like that.
Yeah.
I remember one with Riker where
I can't truly explain it further, but he was in like a lab setting.
No, I
There's
remember.
people with huge heads.
I
Um,
actually remember. Oh, that might have been the very first Star Trek episode, like the menagerie with the giant
it was one of
classic
the
alien
first
heads with, and
one of the first ones.
yeah, no, and they used that idea a couple of times where it was like false reality was kind of being implanted in minds and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
especially brainwashing, like the episode with the five lights. Well, it says five
Four
lights.
lights. Yes, that's a great one.
There are five lights.
Yeah. Well, let's kick it off with. I kind of wanted to touch on topics you were comfortable with, and one of the first things you mentioned to me was culture wars. So I
Yes.
was interested what your perspective is on that and what that means to you. What are the culture wars?
Well, I'm Gen Z, and for example, but
What
I
is
don't
Gen
typically
Z?
think
I get those all mixed up. What age group is that?
it's typically after 1996. After 1996 is considered anybody born after that is considered Generation Z.
Okay.
Before that is millennials, I believe, and before that was like was it Gen X?
So is 87, does that make me a millennial?
I believe it would make you a millennial.
Okay. Do you put a lot of stock in those like generational divides?
Uh, there, I put a little bit of stock into it because like kids usually grow up around each other and get their influences from each other.
True.
Uh, so that generation tends to stick to a certain thing. Not to say they're outliers. Just like there's a common reference to the difference between sexes, like female and male, like how the male is typically stronger. That doesn't mean a female can't be stronger than a man. There's always an exception to the rule.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right.
The same thing goes with the generations. Just like I would be an outlier, so to speak, or an exception to the rule. Uh, Typically, people of the Gen Z are uh, the type that agree with social justice
Right.
and all these different tactics to go along with nowadays, like the riots and everything. I don't agree with the riots. I don't agree with the social justice aspect of it. I don't agree with cancel culture. I don't agree with any of it. So I guess I'm a quite different than person typically my age.
For sure. Well, it sounds like we line up more there as well. I mean, there's a lot of people in my age group that I would consider SJWs. I mean, I think there probably is, like you said, a grouping that it's more common in that age group, but it definitely spreads across the generational divide.
Yeah, like one thing I recently saw was the differences between the generations and how far they're going, like left versus right. The generation has been taking increasingly left, but the Generation Z ticked ever so slightly to the right instead
Right.
of to the left.
I heard that.
Which, yeah, it doesn't mean that they're not like they're basically like millennials, just slightly different.
Right. Well, it's kind of a reaction to, by the way, I might look up here because this is where my camera's recording. I've been looking
Yeah.
down at you when I talk. I might look up here. But yeah, that's I think it's a reaction to the extreme left that's been going on is that the kids are now rebelling against mainstream, and mainstream has become more liberal, SJW, with their extreme overreaches. I mean, when I was a kid, I always compare it to like the angry church lady that we kind
Yeah.
of grew up with in the 90s that was like scared of Pokemon and Harry Potter and wanting to ban they would have
Like
burnings where they would
that
burn like
was,
Pokemon cards or burn Harry Potter books, and I
you know,
disagreed with that at the time too, but now the left has actually kind of taken the place of that from the right hand side where they're trying to cancel things in culture and erase things and morally tell you what you're allowed to enjoy in your entertainment. Like that's crazy. They're even kind of coming back. I don't know if this might be before your time, but like Jack Thompson was this huge person in the media that was anti-video game and trying to get video games canceled because they were turning our kids into monsters. You know, like now the
oh
left
yeah,
is doing that where they're trying to cancel video games.
oh yeah. It happens over and over again, and as the saying goes, if you don't learn from your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Uh, Sort of like how I see like in relation to like history, what's going on nowadays, like international wise.
Hmm.
We see China and the how it's very similar to World War II Germany.
Yeah,
It's very similar. Not to say it's completely exactly the same thing. It's definitely a big similarity there. Both of them had concentration camps.
yeah,
Both of them are treating their citizens like I don't know how to say that.
Like
But you
cattle.
get my they treat their citizens very badly. Like they recently made laws over in China that say that uh they can make people disappear from Hong Kong for speaking against the Chinese government,
Yeah.
and
It's been
that's
that way
completely
for a long time there too.
yeah.
And unfortunately, I'd say America has some of that too, but it's actually coming mostly from the left. The ones that say they're the
Yeah.
most against fascists and Nazis are the ones acting the most like the fascists and the Nazis.
Precisely, and actually, my family came over. Part of my family, I should say, came
Mm.
over here to America to escape the Holocaust itself,
Yeah.
and it just it
Can you
kind of
tell us a little bit
paints
about
me.
that? You mentioned that earlier.
Well, one of my great grandfathers, I believe it was, they were over in the Netherlands. He was like the brother of a king or something like that.
Hmm.
I can't remember, but
That makes him like
he's
a prince, doesn't it?
yeah, basically. But I heard that they took it and made it into a museum because of course they don't have kings and queens in the place that I came from anymore.
Right.
Uh, well, place where my great grandfather came from anymore, because part of my family was originally from the foundation of America also, which is weird still. Uh, yeah, they came over from I believe around the Netherlands in the Netherlands area, and they actually came to America to escape what was happening there, was about to happen there
Right.
because of Germany.
This
So
was like in the 30s or
it was around World War II.
yeah.
I think it might be before or could have been a little bit during. I can't tell you the exact time frame on that point. All I
Gotcha.
was stories passed down to me.
Yeah. And your family's been in America since?
Uh, yeah, pretty much. I was born and raised here in Florida. My father was born in Chicago, and my mom was born in I can't remember. I think it was Virginia.
Would you consider your values or your family's values to be like more American Western values versus, well, Scandinavia is pretty Western culture, but
Yeah. My family particularly, yes. I would consider their values extremely Western and extremely Judeo-Christian.
all right. Is that not the dominant religion in Scandinavia? What is it? What is the religion over there?
Uh,
Or is there one that's dominant?
I, I don't particularly know on that point.
Okay.
I never really looked into that part. That part. All I know is, you know,
Just curious. And what would you consider yourself as far as religion goes?
uh, I tend to label myself as a Messianic Jew, which
Okay.
means I'm a Jew who believes in the Messiah.
Right. Like a Jew that's come back around to Jesus, kind of like a reformed Jew, kind of.
A little bit, but I started out as Christian. It's just I started observing the Torah laws after a while.
That's interesting. So you're a
Yeah.
Christian, but you follow the Torah rules?
Yes. Yes.
Because by my understanding, Jesus, I get the point of Jesus was to like free people from those rules. Is it something that you do like because you feel like
In
you
my
have
belief,
to? Or?
in my belief, it wasn't to free anybody from the rules, but to wash away the sin that was accompanied by the first rebellion or Adam and Eve.
Okay. So yeah, it cures you from ultimate sin, but you still need to follow God's commandments.
Yeah, like for example, if a police officer gives you decides not to give you a ticket because you're speeding, let's say you're speeding down the road and the cop pulls you over and everything, and he decides not to give you a ticket.
Right.
He's giving you grace on that point and telling you that he's not going to fine you or anything. He's just going to give you a warning and let you go. I believe that to be what the sacrifice was meant to be, was supposed to be a grace and a forgiving of the sin that was there, but it doesn't wash away your future sin. So you stay away from that. And after you repent from it, then it washes you away again. And repent in this sort of aspect actually means to turn away from the sin, not just be sorrowful that you did it. Because there's a difference between sorrowful and doing it again and just trying not to do it again, period.
Right. I mean, it makes sense to me that you would want to follow the rules, still, because God must have given them to us for a reason, to live a better life. If you're a Christian and you believe that, it makes sense.
Like I've done countless studies on diet itself and stuff like that, and it seems that the most unhealthy meats are the ones that are considered unclean by the Torah.
Right. No,
Same things like pigs. I don't know if you've ever farmed at all. When I was very young, I would help one of my best friends on the farm, and the pigs, they're just disgusting. Of course, they wallow in their filth the entire day. Their diet consists of trash, basically.
Right.
Stuff that's gonna be thrown away by the stores and whatnot. The stuff that we wouldn't eat, the pigs love.
So let me ask you, how do you? Because I know, or I guess I don't know. I haven't read all of the Torah, but some of the laws are about like sacrifices and doing things like that, correct? Or things that might not make sense in a modern context. So how do you decide which rules of the Torah to follow or not to follow?
It's mainly discernment and counsel. That's actually why the reason why there's Jewish rabbis and why they actually talk to each other a lot of the time is for counsel and to actually realize what they need to do nowadays versus what it was back then.
And sorry to interrupt, it sounds like a dog is going crazy in the background.
It's
actually, coming through very loud. If we could try to,
yeah, sorry.
I know we can't control animals 100%, but
yeah, it's my little daughter Anna.
And also get your girlfriend some water. It sounded like she was coughing like crazy back there.
She has a drink. So do I.
I'm just messing. But no, that's interesting. So were you brought up as a Christian, you said, and did you try out different religions, or how did you get to the point where you're at now with your beliefs?
Well, yeah, I grew up as Christian until I was about 13 is when I started to change. Let's see.
What caused that?
I started looking into the Bible a lot more, and of course, I read more things than.
You've been dissecting that shit since before I met you.
Yeah. Well, my girlfriend mentioned to me that I was like into it I'm back in high school. Before she knew me, I was deep into learning the context of the Bible and what was inside of it and everything.
Yeah.
But around when I was dating her back in high school, around freshman year. Before I dated you, yeah.
You're here, met in freshman year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Met in freshman year.
You got into reading the Bible, you said, and that maybe started a domino effect to changing your beliefs. What happened there?
Well, I started reading the Torah, which, if anybody doesn't know that's watching this, the Torah is the first 5 books in the Bible.
Right.
It's
the ones written by
Genesis,
Moses.
Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Which mainly contains most of the laws that are in the Old Testament or the Tanakh. That's the Jewish word for it, of course.
Right.
That's their religious book, is the entirety of the Old Testament. But I started reading the different laws and whatnot. It's like even I began to say like, why should I follow these? Like, these are sort of ridiculous. But then I actually started doing a study on them and studying the different things that it could mean, and particularly whenever I was thinking about like pork, like why couldn't we eat pork?
Right.
As it turns out, the animal's meat is very dirty, so to speak. Whenever a pig eats something, it takes 4 hours to digest it. Unlike animals that typically would be eaten, it takes like 8 or 10. The pig's toxins, well, the toxins that are inside the food get transferred into the meat and they stay there.
Mm.
it actually gets so bad in the pig that they actually have a sewer line that goes directly out from their toes to get rid of all this toxic waste that is that's actually inside their body. So it's just sitting there, and whenever we eat it, we're eating those toxins and those parasites as well. That's why we cook it at such a high temperature. That's why you don't eat raw pork. That's why you never eat undercooked pork or undercooked anything for that point, usually. You can easily get something wrong with pork, like parasites and other diseases that go along with eating the wrong thing.
Gotcha.
And that's why that's probably the reason why I actually started following the dietary laws at first. But before that, I did start to doubt the entire Old Testament because of my train of thought was like, these are ridiculous. But of course, as I said later, I ended up adapting my thought to the Bible instead, because particularly from one passage that sat there and said God doesn't change his mind, and then after that I saw another one that says, how can the clay say to the potter, you didn't make me? How can the clay say to the potter, you don't know what you're doing? Which kind of struck me in a very odd way, because now I realize that a lot of people that tend to hate God or tend to be angry with him are typically judging him, and that's where why that phrase is comes in very handy to me as like looking at these things, because they're the ones who are judging God, and how can they judge when they're the created thing? It's the same sort of context. How can the clay say to the potter, you don't know what you're doing?
Right.
Or you didn't make me.
Well, it makes sense to me. I mean, as far as the rules, even from an atheistic point of view, that they weren't following the rules for no reason. Like they were things that helped and that made their society better, or they would have been discarded. So, even if you think that, because I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, but I think that the rules of the Bible are all there for a reason, and they have made our society better. Western civilization itself, even freedom of speech and these sort of liberties, are ideas that were kind of codified by the Bible and by Christians especially. But I don't see any reason why the Jewish laws wouldn't, at least for the most part, make sense still today, or at least be helpful to some degree.
That kind of reminds me of things that I'm studying on intelligence or knowledge that seems to be lost over time is what they actually meant, or what was actually happening back then. Like, for example, the Bible mentions unicorns. Do you know what that means?
Not necessarily, no.
In the Greek, it was actually transferred over to Greek from Hebrew, and they transferred the word over to unicorn, which is a Greek manifestation, or a Greek mythical creature, of course. But the original unicorn was actually supposed to be the rhino over in Africa.
Right. It was just their terminology for it. And I know there's also like giant serpents and things they talk about that people theorize are dragons or something like that.
Particularly, I can't remember what it was called.
Leviathan?
Leviathan, yes.
Yeah.
That's another one. It's especially put out over in an extra biblical book known as Enoch.
Right.
But that's actually commonly regarded to be the hippo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is that just going back to the etymology of the word and seeing what
yeah, it's from the Hebrew itself and everything.
Gotcha. Well,
yeah, I've done a lot of studying, just like the common Christian name for the Messiah is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at his name and the origins of the root and everything, his name is nowhere near that. It would actually be closer to Joshua.
Right. I've heard that as well.
Yes, and that's in context to the Greek New Testament. If you look up the word for Jesus, which is like, I don't know how to explain it other than it's like it starts with an I. Isus or something like that. I don't know how to say it correctly, but if you look at the Hebrew word, Hebrew root, it actually be not Hebrew root, but the name goes for the Messiah as well as Joshua of the Old Testament. So technically, their names, since their name is the same in Greek, it should be the same in Hebrew as well.
Gotcha.
So the name is technically Joshua if you want to Anglicize the name, which I don't think is technically correct. You wouldn't call someone Jose Josie.
Right.
That's just,
I
yeah.
wanted to touch on too. You had mentioned some other religions. Was it a straight path for you going from Christianity kind of to Judaism back to Christianity, or were you researching other religions or interested in other philosophies?
I was definitely interested in other philosophies. As I said before, I like looking into different things, looking into different natures and different everything, different points of view, and that's just one of those that I would look into. I would look into Buddhism, Maoism, and everything like that also. So I looked into multiple different religions. Even like I even read the Quran itself.
Okay.
Most of it, I should say. I haven't read the entire thing.
Nice. Yeah, I've read some of the Quran and some Buddhist texts and things like that. So, what's I forget the name of it. Something Gita, Bhagavad Gita. I forget
Yeah,
the exact name now, but I read that.
it's something like
It's
that.
like a
I know.
classic Hindu Buddhist
Yeah.
text. But no, and I found it very interesting as well. But I kind of ended up I kind of see it all as different, almost artistic ways of viewing the world. You know that and kind of like I was saying with the rules, the ones that line up the best with reality or have the biggest benefit for humans have been the ones that have stuck around and are still here today. But they're all kind of I see it as like an artistic expression but done from the sense that it's 100% real. So it's more intense than just like writing a book or reading about Star Wars. It's like because the authors of it, I think for the most part, believed what they were writing, was real and true, and it almost comes from like the subconscious part of humans, like the parts that before the rational part where we don't even really understand why it's important, but we know this information is important and it needs to get distributed and not lost. Like you were saying, a lot of texts are lost, but it's the really important things that resonated with humans that have stuck around and kind of been passed down.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because think of like the survival of the fittest,
Right,
if
right.
so to speak. Uh,
For ideas.
if one survives, it probably be better for survival, even if it's just a belief or an intellectual thought. If you're still alive, then it must work.
Right, right.
So,
Or
I
improve your
can,
life to some degree.
and one thing I do realize though is like for religion, that tends to bring a community closer together, although they tend to have a lot of irrational beliefs.
Definitely. Yeah, and you I find that all over in families, in countries and governments, all these different organizations of people. There's some good that comes out of it, but there's a lot of irrationality that gets built up around it because people just start defending the idea for the idea's sake instead of actually looking at it objectively and saying, yeah, but is this helping us? Is this actually helping people and helping our society? Or are we just protecting this idea because this is what I was taught, since I was a kid? Kind of goes into the biggest version of it now is government. That's the biggest religion that people believe in,
Yeah.
that they have faith in and they feel like they have to follow and propagate, or else just the world would end if we didn't do it.
There's this one Jewish philosophy, right? It goes, there's a difference between a truth and a fact. A fact can be the truth, but the truth is not always a fact.
Sure. It's the
Uh,
difference of looking at part versus the whole. Kind of. Have you heard of the
so
trivium?
what was that?
Have you heard of the trivium?
No, I have not.
That kind of goes into that too. It's just a way of describing how the human brain like processes reality. It goes back to like classical teaching, but was kind of taken out of the schools. But
Yeah,
it has to do with the three aspects of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And what you were describing as facts would be the grammar, like just the individual bits of information in the world that you're picking up or taking in with your senses. And then the logic is how you process that in a non-contradictory way that makes sense and isn't you're trying your best, of course, to get rid of fallacies and things that aren't consistent in your thinking. And then rhetoric is the third part, which is how you express it to other people or how you act on that, like in the world. It's kind of like computer systems too, like input, processing, output.
yeah,
If you have an error in any of those parts, you're going to get garbage back out or something that's not matching up with reality. But if you're doing it correctly, then you're going to get something that's consistent and that matches up with reality or is true, like you were saying.
yeah. Kind of reminds me of the what he said afterwards. It was like, because someone asked him, well, what is the difference then? He said, well, the truth is, the world should live in harmony. The fact is, it doesn't.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, it's a slight difference, but yeah, like you said, the truth is we should live in harmony. The fact is that we don't. Just like how they say communism was never tried right.
Right.
That's the truth, but the fact is you'll never get it right.
Right. I believe you're correct for sure. If you understand the principles and what it actually is, then it's always going to lead to what it has led to. And just to say too, I think it's been confused for people what communism and fascism and socialism are. It's very confused in the culture and in the idea space. But to me, like principally and definitionally, I think all governments are communist. They're all fascist and they're all socialist. It's just the amount of degrees to which the knobs are turned, on each one. But all governments, by definition, believe they can enforce the rules using violence or fascism. They believe they can control, wealth redistribution with taxation to some degree, and some to a huge degree. And they all believe in social control and social manipulation and us all being kind of combined or connected through government. And that's how they all get their power. It's just slight variations of extremes of, China versus America. I would obviously say America's a better government, or we're treated better here, but we're still just as much under the same dictates as something as extreme as China, if you get right up to that line.
I remember one person talking about how America has something set apart from other ones. They actually have a constitution, or a document that actually says what the government can't do.
Right.
Uh,
If
and
they
it
follow
seems
it.
like
That's the thing, is they don't really follow
of
it.
the document, and they don't do they constantly infringe and infringe
Yeah.
and infringe on every single right that there is, and it's in line to keep people safe, or so they say.
Right. It's always for our protection.
Yeah, it's always for your protection.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you lock an animal in the cage, you could say it's for its protection.
Yeah.
Correct?
It's safer in there. It's also less free. That's what freedom comes with a risk, and that's some people have been trained, I think, to not want to take that risk and to feel like they need that protector to keep them safer, quote unquote, but also, keep them in a cage, like you're saying, keep them locked in. Let me seeing what other topic we might want to discuss. You had mentioned something about religious ties to the forgotten past. I'm curious if
Yes.
there was a specific reference or something you wanted to talk about there.
I remember this one interview I saw with this scientist about catastrophism,
Mm-hmm.
and he related to Noah's Ark and the the Epic of Gilgamesh and
Mhm.
all these other different stories of a global flood.
Like Atlantis and things like that.
Sort of like that, but it's less like Atlantis and more like Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what happened is it turns out 10,000 or 12,000 something like that years ago, according to this archaeologist, there was a global flood caused by a comet crashing into the Earth, and it could also that could also explain the massive floods all around the world with this massive comet. And around that time, we only had our population went from pretty big to really small, and then we had to repopulate again.
Right. And the
And
idea is
that's
like a lot of cultures were lost back then, or civilizations might have been lost in that period.
yeah. That reminds me of the saying, Cleopatra, when she was around, it's closer to us right now than she was to the building of the pyramids.
Right. They were very old.
Yeah, they were built long time ago.
And I think connected to this theory, or a part of it, I've heard talk about the Sphinx maybe being even older. And there's evidence that there's like water damage on the Sphinx. That
Yeah, and water has
it
been
was
around.
there in a time when there was more lush area, more rain and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard. Do you remember the name of that archaeologist? Because I think it might be the same person I'm thinking of, but
I can't remember. I remember the interview was on Joe Rogan.
okay. I want to say his last name is West, if that sounds right, something like that, but we could be
Something like
giving
that.
bad info. Again, check our grammar. Our grammar might be not the truth. So sorry about that if you want to research that on your own. Let's see. Any other major topics? One thing, because obviously I'm anti-government, as I was saying.
Yeah.
So I did see some potential conflict and you don't have to say where you work if you want to keep that private, but you had mentioned that it's a weapons manufacturer that, sells to the government. So
Yeah.
it seems like you do have some anarchistic thoughts, although you might not be an anarchist. What are your thoughts on government, and how do you square that with what you do? And I mean, do you support the wars morally, or what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely don't support war. I've always been a man of peace.
Mhm.
I say if conflict can be avoided, and both parties can agree, then let them agree. I don't think we should start wars over such simple things as we know, the ongoing war like oil and opium and everything like that.
Right.
And even like the war against drugs, even in that context where like war is something meant to be something else metaphorically.
Right.
Even in that, I think that they should stop it. I don't think it's up to the government to keep people safe. As I said before, I don't typically agree with the government trying to take away the rights or even the decisions that an individual should make.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. That's for sure.
That reminds me of over in a different state. They recently got was recently? I don't know, but they got rid of gas pump attendants because people weren't allowed to get to pump their own gas. The people from that state started complaining and saying, like, "What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to pump my gas myself? Am I supposed to go out get in my car and then I'm going to smell like gasoline afterwards?" They were saying all these different things, just like, you're getting your rights back. You're allowed to pump your gas yourself instead of having to do it, have an attendant do it.
But they had been trained to be used to someone taking care of them and doing that thing. So,
Yes.
here that went away a long time ago, having
Yeah.
a gas station attendant. So we're used to it. But to them, it was like, whoa, we need someone to pump our gas. No, and it's exactly the same, and to a worse degree with things like welfare and government education, government schools, where the government has just taken over these facets of our lives, and people can't even imagine who's going to build the roads, without government. Even though it's private companies that build almost all the roads, they're just contracted by governments, and if we weren't paying those taxes, it would be very easy for us to find more efficient ways to build roads. It's not like corporations or businesses that need those roads to survive wouldn't want to pitch in and make sure they had good roads to get to their businesses, you know.
Reminds me of a Pizza Hut ad a while back.
I've heard about this.
You would actually go around fixing potholes to the places they lived to.
And they were more efficient than the government by far. Yeah,
more efficient. I can agree with you on that part that, like, I don't believe that government should be this big. I'm somewhat of a anarcho-capitalist, but at the same point, I believe in some government and some regulation. Regulation isn't always a bad thing, just like it's not always a good thing. Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing,
right,
so to speak.
Well, how that's my biggest argument for that is I used to kind of believe, in minarchism or small government, and hey, then, our problems will be solved and I agree it would be better if the government was just smaller than big. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge the fact that the United States government, which was designed specifically to be, the smallest government that had ever existed and had the most rules and regulations against it gaining more power, is now the largest government that has ever existed in the history of the world. So to me, if even your goal is to create the smallest government ever, it doesn't really matter because all governments are going to extend their power, and maybe it's worse because it has that mythology over it of, oh, we're a small government, we have a constitution. It kind of lulled people into a state that allowed them to let their government get to be the biggest that's ever existed. So to me, it just doesn't make sense when I look at the facts of the matter and look at, what has our government become, that, it seems there's no way out. If you accept government, it's gonna take over. Then they won't all be as bad or as big as the U.S. government or the Chinese government, but they're all gonna try to grow and gain power for themselves over their citizens.
That reminds me of a quote. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that's actually probably a pretty good point to put a pause on this. Are there any other topics you'd like to touch on here at the end before we wrap up?
Unless you want to talk about aliens, I'm fine.
We could do a little aliens. Why not? Let's go. This is the extended, the deep, dark parts of this show. You got to get to the very end to hear this. So I wish I had a sound effect to play out. Maybe I'll edit one in with the X-Files theme song. But so hit me with what are your thoughts on UFOs and aliens?
Well, recently, if you don't know, it's not typically called a UFO anymore. It's called a unidentified aerial phenomenon instead.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And there was a couple. I think it was last year. There was a couple different news articles that came out saying that the U.S. Can't remember which ship, but one of our ships was actually quote unquote swarmed by these drones, so to speak, that were actually cylindrical in nature. Okay. They looked like the metallic Tic Tacs that we heard from these different alien stories. We saw many different accounts and a whole bunch of proof that they were actually there and that they actually did see these things. The biggest question is, who is it from, and how did they move so fast? Because according to the reports, they moved really fast and they outmaneuvered anything that they could build. So the question is, like, who has this technology? Is it terrestrial or is it extraterrestrial?
What do you think?
My first thought was China. But at the same point, if you bought a piece of technology from like Wish or from China itself, it's shit. You see my language?
Well, doesn't mean they're not hoarding the good stuff for themselves. They might have some great technology that they're just not selling.
I don't typically think that's true because communism doesn't make the best of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's China either. I was just playing devil's advocate.
Fair enough.
My thoughts on it. Did you have any other idea? Let me hear. Go ahead.
There was a point. Then all of a sudden, I heard another report that came from China itself saying that they had one of their ships swarmed too. Russia said it also, and basically like any other country that has a navy said
boy.
the same thing.
Was this this year or pretty recently?
It was last year, I believe. This report came out. I don't know when it actually happened itself.
Is this tied to the Pentagon, like just now coming out and releasing UFO stuff as well, or is this separate?
I think it's tied to that, yeah.
Okay.
But I just found it very interesting that like these things, these Tic Tacs, that's what they call them in the report, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Just they're being found everywhere, and they're swarming our ships, not attacking at all. They're not doing anything. They're just kind of observing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what else would do that except for another government or something that's out of space that was trying to keep an eye on us. What's that for? I wouldn't know, and I'm not gonna assume that it's real without actual proof.
True.
But it's
all we're getting are reports from governments that we don't really trust either, and so how far can we trust what they're saying?
For example, we don't trust China on its COVID numbers.
Right. Oh, definitely not. I don't trust any government on their COVID numbers, especially seeing what they were counting as a COVID death versus not, and the fact that they can't really isolate the COVID virus from just the regular coronavirus. Yeah. I have doubts for sure on that.
Yeah.
But going back to the aliens, did you have a final theory on that or idea of what it might be? Because I kind of have an idea.
Go ahead and fill me on yours, and I'll tell you about after that.
So my thought is just going back to my research on the CIA, primarily. They have a history of actually using not only guerrilla warfare, manipulating news stories, using mythologies of local areas to actually attack people. This is all well known, and I don't know, I'm sure there's countless stories that have not been released to the public, but there's like a local area where there was a fear of vampires or this like local monster, and they used that to spread fear and control the area. So the CIA has a history of using these sorts of subterfuge. And I also tie that with the fact that the technology that we're aware of that the government has is usually 50 years out of date. The government had all kinds of technologies well before we knew about them. And I imagine that today they have technologies that we definitely don't know about. And it would make perfect sense to me that they would do some sort of experimentation or have technology that seemed like magic just because we don't know how it works. And the CIA knows how to use mythology and storytelling to spread fear, to control populations. And I'm sure they're doing it on a global scale now that, we'll hear about in 50 years when they release the information on it. But to me, it makes sense. And I see that tied in with like MK Ultra experiments where the CIA would dose people with drugs and manipulate their minds. And, I'm of the opinion that most likely most alien abductions was the CIA dressing up in silly alien costumes, dosing people with LSD, and they didn't know they were on LSD. And so they have this crazy, mind-blowing experience where they meet real aliens, but it's just they're tripping and the CIA is just messing with them and seeing what they can get people to believe. So to me, it would make sense to take that from the 70s to now, and maybe they have some crazy drone tech that they're testing out, and they're just using the cover of aliens. Or they're, one other idea is it plugs into the Blue Beam thing. Have you heard about Blue Beam?
I've heard of the Blue Planet Project, but I've never heard of Blue Beam.
Blue Beam was like a holographic experiment that was done, and you can look this up online. There's some released documents about it from the government. Who knows what was actually tried or tested, but it was using like lasers and holograms to like put things in the sky that weren't really there and get people to believe that they saw the Mother Mary or aliens or things like that. And people have conjectured that they're going to try and do that on a massive scale to make people think aliens are invading and that we need to give up all our liberties so the government can protect us. So I see them working towards that idea, whether they're ever going to go fully into it or actually do it. I think they are experimenting and seeing what they can get away with and seeing what people will believe. So I don't know that that's what that is, but that's my thing that makes the most sense to me is it's probably the CIA or some other MI6 organization just messing with people and seeing, testing out their new technology, basically.
I can definitely understand that. I think I've actually heard that a theory like that before. Mine is actually like I'll give the government the benefit of the doubt, basically.
Oh, that's always dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous. Don't get me wrong, but like the Israeli government
Mm-hmm.
came out. A ex-defense minister or
Okay.
something like that from Israel came out and said that they actually are in contact with aliens and they have this contract and whatnot, and
Oh boy.
saying that whenever Trump was president, he said this says, and Trump knows about it, and he wants to tell everybody, but he can't because of different things that are holding him back, like different government organizations,
Right.
basically silencing from him saying so. And if that's true, that's a very weird thing that why wouldn't the government tell us in the first place, sort of thing.
Yeah, because their blue beam tech isn't ready yet. They're waiting till they can really trick us to believe it's real. They're just planting those little seeds, so people are like, "Oh, see, the government said there's aliens. Oh, they said Israel said it, so we know it's true."
Yeah.
I think it's also possible he thinks it's true and it's not. Like again, the CIA could have all kinds of means of tricking him into thinking he just really talked with an alien, but it was just one of their guys on a Skype call, or they drugged him with DMT and then had a conversation with him. Who knows? But that's the problem with governments is they're all using coercion and subterfuge and things that disrupt the discourse and make it hard for us just to know what is going on. I can't have just a face-to-face talk like I'm having with you with someone in the government that holds enormous power over me. So it creates these disparities in trust and who knows what the truth is. It's really hard to know. And that's again kind of goes back to the CIA. That's good for them. If people can't figure out what's real, that's better than anything. So they just throw all kinds of crazy ideas on the wall and let people fight over, what's reality.
I can definitely see that. I don't put any stock in any theory, to be honest.
Yeah,
But either way, it's definitely fun to speculate.
definitely. It's like I was saying in the first episode, it's good to be able to detach yourself from ideas and look at them at their own merit and don't become emotionally attached to them, because that's how you're manipulated, is when you're emotionally attached to these ideas being true or false, and then you can't think about it objectively anymore.
It reminds me of a debate between a flat earther and myself. A couple different flat earthers, to be honest. I remember seeing this picture that they would commonly throw around, and they would throw like they would all use the same thing. Boats push off of water. Airplanes push off of air. What do rockets push off of? And I'm saying like I can sort of understand their argument, sort of, but that's not how these things work.
Sure.
They don't push off of anything.
Well, yeah, the fuel pushes off of the rocket itself and pushes it away from where the fuel is going.
Every action has an opposite and equal reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is, whenever you create an explosion, which is what a plane is doing, it's creating a controlled explosion, and what it does is it pushes equal in all directions. So it pushes that explosion itself is pushing the plane forward.
Exactly.
It's not pushing off of anything. The plane isn't pushing off anything itself, or the even propeller. It's the explosion that's propelling the plane. And which leads me to another thing that my instructors would constantly say going through school. How do planes fly? And they would always put up the acronym PFM, pure freaking magic.
It's just controlled falling, really. But I appreciate it, Thomas. Oh, go ahead.
How a plane goes forward in the first place is just by, of course, taking the airflow over an airfoil, is what they call it, the wing of an aircraft. And it creates what's it called? Creates less density below the aircraft, so it actually, or was it above? I can't remember. Either way, like it wants the aircraft to go upwards because of the way the wind travels over the airfoil, and combined with the jet engine. Combined with the jet engine.
I think she really liked your explanation.
Yeah. Combined with the jet engine, it actually compels it to keep on going forward, to not be stopped by the air resistance.
True. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. We can go ahead and wrap it up here. Did you have anything online, like a Twitter or something you want to plug here where people can follow you online?
Well, my Facebook is my name, Thomas VanDommelen. That's VanDommelen. Other than that, I don't really have a thing on any other platform.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on, man. You're welcome back anytime. If you have specific topics you want to talk about, or just another chit chat, definitely fun. I found it engaging, and I think we'll both get better at it as we do it more. But thanks for coming on again, and everyone watching at home, definitely check out my friend's podcast, the Bridging the Gap podcast, which is now called Crossing the Chasm. I'm going to be a regular member on that podcast as well, and I've got more interviews and videos coming out the rest of the week, so check them out. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Everyone have a great day, and thanks again, Thomas. Have a good one.
Have a good one.